Hi folks, and welcome to another video documentary from aplaintruth.info. Today's subject is as deep and as dire as it gets. The UV indexes are being recorded above EPA estimates. They're not even registered on the scale the EPA is registering. Please watch this video and the subsequent video on geoengineering to understand the full causal factor for the UV index just going off the charts and killing all life around Earth.
Look at the UV from Southeast Phoenix. It's like 12.48 in the direct sunlight with no clouds. And what's odd is supposed to be like a high tomorrow in the 70s.
Many people have felt how warm the sun feels on their face, and some think it's their imagination, but it's not. The ozone layer is being torn to shreds. Climate engineering appears to be a primary causal factor, not the only factor, but a primary factor. So today I want to show UV meters that show how high the UVB is specifically. We're told that by all major agencies, WHO, the World Health Organization, NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, we're told by all major organizations that no more than 5% of all incoming UV should be UVB. But we're metering this, and we know that that's a lie. In fact, we're seeing UVB levels that are 50 to 60% of incoming UV. That means the UVB is about 1,000% of what we're being told. So again, the agencies appear to be basically putting out a fictitious UV reading. It's all collected by a central data collecting center, and the reading they put out on a simple scale of 1 to 15 simply isn't related to any actual measurements. The UVB issue is a very dire issue, and it's imperative that we bring this issue to light so that agencies are forced to disclose this. It's a very serious human health issue. It's very serious for optical damage to the human body.
Another thing I wanted to touch on, down in Australia, large sections of the Great Barrier Reef. You know what, guys? That's UV. Here's another thing, sunburned whales. Ozone hole could be the culprit. Well, probably, but it's UVB. How the coral depends on algae to survive, and the algae are leaving the coral. They don't like the coral anymore. because the coral is vibrating at a different frequency because of the UV. And it would be UVB. It's penetrating the water and it's bleaching like everything else that is bleaching. If it's not bleaching it, it's burning it. And I'm going to show you some pictures here in a few minutes that are mind-blowing. This talks about large sections of the Australia Great Barrier Reef is now dead. Well, check this out. Fish are getting skin cancer down at Australia's Great Barrier Reef from UV radiation. Well, why are we still talking about the warm waters damaging the coral and not connecting the dots that it's got to be the UV if it's...
And not only is the UV destroying the coral reefs, but also sunscreen lotion, which we're going to get into now. Sunscreen is a dangerous, dangerous product, including nanoparticulate matters that are getting into the coral reefs and helping to destroy them as well. And if the sunscreen is that powerful that it can get down and change the effects of the mighty coral reefs, what do you think it's doing to our children when they lather with it all the time, and the mothers and fathers are adamant about lathering them up every time they go outside? They're breathing in, they're inhaling, they're ingesting, it's going through their blood and their blood-brain barriers and the nanoparticulate matter. Let's get into it more. Sunscreens are dangerous, folks. Please, please listen. Included in sunscreens, which very few know about, are nanoparticulate matters. Nanoparticulars are as small or smaller than 1/80,000th of the width of a hair. They can be manipulated and organized, and they are totally cost efficient because they can be self-replicating, but they are totally unregulated by the FDA and the EPA. They include titanium dioxide and zinc oxide. Nanoparticulate matter is a $1 trillion business. It is totally under the radar of the consumer, but it is in so many products because it's, like I said, cheap to produce and cheap to replicate, so cost efficiency is amazing. So here's from the Environmental Working Group, nanoparticulates in sunscreens. Here's the positive. They provide strong protection with few health concerns. Zinc oxide offers good protection from UVA rays, doesn't talk about UVB. Titanium oxide less so, but better than most other active ingredients. Nanoparticulars in American sunscreens are either titanium dioxide or zinc dioxide. So here we go, telling you the shape and size of the particulars affect sun protection. Nanoparticulates in sunscreens don't penetrate the skin. That's what the headline reads, but you read down here, it says, well, neither study could determine if zinc nanoparticles penetrated the skin. See how they mislead you? Here's another one. It is unlikely that nanoparticulates in sunscreen can cause skin damage when energized by the sun. However, the next line says zinc oxide are photocatalysts, meaning that when they are exposed to UV radiation, they can form free radicals that damage surrounding cells. Information from suppliers suggests that U.S. sunscreen formulators generally employ the appropriate forms of zinc oxide and titanium dioxide in their products. Recent studies in other countries indicate that manufacturers do not always use sunscreen-grade minerals. Since manufacturers are not required to make this information public, the extent of these problems is difficult to gauge. Nanoparticulates could cause lung damage when inhaled. The International Agency for Research on Carcinogens has classified titanium dioxide as a possible carcinogen when inhaled in high doses. Insoluble nanoparticulates that penetrate skin or lung tissue can cause extensive organ damage. Nanoparticulars in lip sunscreens can be swallowed and might damage the gastrointestinal tract, although there are no studies to suggest that consumers swallow enough zinc oxide or titanium dioxide to pose a concern. Do current federal screening regulations ensure the safety and effectiveness of sunscreen minerals? No. The U.S. government has not enacted regulations, guidelines, or recommendations on particular characteristics that would maximize sun protection and minimize health risk. FDA sunscreen rules assume that any type of titanium dioxide or zinc oxide can be safely used in sunscreens. It's unbelievable. This is such a double standard they're talking here. EWG remains deeply concerned about the general lack of oversight of nanotechnology and associated risks to consumers, people with workplace exposures, and the environment. Thanks for nothing. Cover up your children, folks. Don't put on the sunscreen. They do need vitamin D. They do need to get out in the sun, but please help minimize their exposure. They're the greatest risk.
What we know about skin cancer risk is sunburns under the age of 10 can portend a large increase in risk for melanoma.
So this is from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. This is June 2nd, 2015. Melanoma incidence and mortality trends, 1982 to 2030. What it says is melanoma incident rates have continued to increase and risk behaviors remain high. It's responsible for the most skin cancer deaths. Results. Incident rates are projected to increase for white males and females through 2019, and beyond. Skin cancer is the most common form of cancer in the United States. Melanoma is responsible for the most cancer deaths. An individual dying from melanoma loses an average of 20 and a half years of potential life. Treatments cost about $3.3 billion annually. That's going to go up, making more bank for big pharma. Melanoma is the 5th most common cancer for men and 7th most common for women. More than 90% of melanoma cases in the United States are attributed to skin cell damage from ultraviolet radiation exposure. The Guide to Community Preventative recommends multi-component community-wide programs and educational, environmental, and policy interventions based on evidence that they increase UV protective behaviors, decrease skin damage that can develop into melanoma by increasing the availability of protective clothing and hats and scheduling activities before or after midday hours.
Hi, this is Richard Forrester, Amador County Supervisor and CSAC President, and I'm here to tell you today that there's a crisis in California.
The tree mortality that we're experiencing, it's really unprecedented, and unless you get into the Sierra Nevada, in particular the central and southern Sierras, you don't necessarily understand the gravity of it. We've got lots of photos and videos of it, but they don't do justice unless you're flying over it or standing in these stands of dead trees.
Is being burned off of trees in many locations around the globe. Trees are dropping branches, which means you have a lot of dead branches with those trees. A lot of foliage dropping is occurring. We see plankton die off because the UVB is so intense.
The Rocky Mountains of North America, home to some of the most beautiful, pristine forests in the world. But the shades of burnt gold and reds aren't the changing tones of autumn. They're dead and dying trees.
We're looking at tree mortality over a scale of tens of millions of hectares in the last decade alone.
In fact, right across the globe, there are reports of trees dying in mass numbers. From Europe, from Africa, even right across the Amazon, and right here in Australia. Summer provided an ideal feeding ground. This big eucalypt took hundreds of years to grow and died in just a couple of weeks. In fact, nearly every tree you see here died suddenly and at the same time.
Last summer was the hottest, driest period on record, and we had some 122 days with no rain. We had weeks with over 42 degrees, and we started to see large areas just collapsing and dying.
Leaves are solar panels. They absorb light. Light is processed through the leaf. Well, if these leaves are receiving a different frequency, one that's not suitable or that it's used to, this is what happens. And then bears, it's going to be mutated as well. To me, that just totally makes sense. Here's another one that's just out of whack. Another one, out of whack. Too much UVB.
ecologist Dr. Craig Allen sees the situation in WA as typical of the trends being observed elsewhere in the world. He's documented over 100 examples of large-scale tree deaths in the past 25 years.
We see all around the world in places where there have been droughts, particularly droughts and heat waves, trigger mass waves of mortality. No major forest type is immune.
Across the western US, tree death rates have more than doubled in the past few decades.
Where I work in northern New Mexico, we see everything from grasses and shrubs to trees dying.
Die-off events are quick and dramatic.
So what we're seeing in these forest die-off events around the world are trees passing the tipping point of stress, the thresholds of mortality. Unfortunately, we don't know very much about these thresholds at this point. What's most alarming is that these die-off events may be just the tip of the iceberg. We know that warming temperatures exacerbate tree mortality, and the climate predictions are that the world is going to get much warmer soon. So we may be just at the very front edge of what could be wholesale mortality of the world's forests, the forests that we know and care about today.
Yet another atmospheric river ripping through California. Record waves at over 32 feet on Monterey Bay. Record snowfall across Squaw Valley, now even beating the 1980 totals. Rare atmospheric lightning over San Francisco. And how the news always explains these rare events is, it's not unheard of. Well, yeah, not unheard of. We had to go back to 1862, looking at this kind of flooding. Drought, NOAA predicting intensifying drought through 2017, continuing or worsening drought, but suddenly the reservoirs refilled. Wow, that was a wrong call. How is it that a private company can get the forecast right, yet our government can't? And they're the ones saying out into 100 years into the future. And the IPCC is just a puppet for the UNFCCC. And I could see why Trump removed all references of climate change off the White House website. And while you're watching the video, please remember,
we're seeing an almost entire species loss here, of the predominant species for this area.
Those trees are essentially the lungs of the state. And so from an air quality perspective, they're critical in terms of just maintaining general air quality. They sequester carbon and hold on to emissions that would otherwise be coming out from wildfires.
Because when this stuff burns, all that carbon goes in the atmosphere.
So the collapse in California off the coast has been especially devastating and is the canary in the coal mine for the entire world. So I want to go through the collapse that's been going on the past few years here, specifically in Northern California. The kelp forests have just collapsed in a matter of a couple years. This is an article from the local Press Democrat from April 2016. Large tracts of kelp forest that once blanketed the sea off the north coast have vanished over the past 2 years. Here's this word again. The unprecedented collapse has been observed along hundreds of miles of coastline from San Francisco to Oregon. Scientists have described the landscape left behind as urgent barren. They blame it on warmer water is to blame. And you go down here, and again, they're saying we're not quite sure why this is happening, but also factoring the kelp die-off is a so-called warm blob that came down from Alaska in North America in the beginning of 2014. Find that the California crab season is facing its second year of troubles, and this is in 2016. We do not have crab regularly anymore. It's toxic. The algae blooms that are out here is causing toxicity in the crabs. If you eat it, you're taking your own chance. Fishermen out here are struggling mightily, and the die-off just continues. It's gotten so bad that China suspends imports of California Diogenes crab. And we're saying goodbye to the California coast, farewell to the king salmon. Salmon kind of been part and part of the whole food chain. This was an article from back in 2008. Again, they're using the word unprecedented, but we're seeing that happen all around popular salmon here. Giant salmon die-off at California hatchery. Excuse me, this happened just recently, May 12th, 2017. This was just the other day. They're trying to feed them back in and repopulate, and they're having a horrible time.
Ironically, tiburon, which of course is Spanish for shark. Emily?
They know the what, Veronica, but not why or how these sharks are dying. And they are dying in the hundreds, if not thousands, on beaches just like this one here.
We have the whale die-off. This is in Florida, January 17th, 2017. More than 80 false killer whales die in largest stranding in Florida history. And then we're having more die-off with sunburn whales. Because of the UV being depleted, the ozone is causing sunburns on whale species. Again, this is back in 2010, but we're getting many reports of this occurring more and more in our oceans. Now, this is over to Global Research. This is March 24th, 2017. It's an updated article. The ocean is dying. Marine and animal life die-offs California coast. And you can read the sad, ugly, terrible, horrible news that sea lions were stranded, 2,700 stranded in 2015, up from 1,171 in 2013. It's gotten worse since then. Unusually large number of sea lions stranding in 2013 was a red flag. There was food available. This has never happened before. It's incredible. There's also a good chance the problem will continue. Okay, and then we're coming down here. Starfishes are dying by the millions up and down the west coast. Localized extinction of some species. Then we got, just recently, we had the collapse of the sardine population. Back in October, fishermen reported they came back empty-handed without a single fish after 12 hours of trolling and some $1,000 spent on fuel. They would not go out there unless they thought they would capture something and spend that much money on fuel. We go down here, same true in the Washington state. What are we having dying off here? Well, we're having large amounts of unprecedented seabird die-off. Over 100,000 seabirds died off the coast of Washington. Doesn't necessarily sound large statistically speaking, but precedent in the history of recorded animal deaths suggests that it is in fact massive. Going around in the world and chronicle it, there's this website here, End Times Prophecy. I'm not wild about the site, but they do have an ongoing list that you should be checking out. It's under end-times-prophecy.org. I'll include it in link notes. But you can just look at the deaths going around, and you may say, oh, this is normal course of die-off, but it is anything but normal, folks. The weather is greatly changing. Geoengineering is changing everything. Our toxic world is coming back to bite us, and it's starting with all the animals in the world, and they're coming after us as well. So hopefully this will give you an idea what's going on here in California, besides just the record drought in 5 years, and then the very next year, record rains and snow in the mountains, just 1 year apart. Weather is changing. Geoengineering is changing it.
On my knees and I'm praying, praying. On my knees and I'm praying, praying. On my knees and I'm praying, praying.
I feel a poison moving quickly inside. It's heading straight for my heart, love, and I will surely die. And as the coldness comes creeping in, I'm on my knees and I'm praying just to feel the sun again. And I'll risk everything, I will risk everything, I will risk everything I know. I will risk everything, I will risk everything, I will risk everything for love. Champion for my heartbeat. We'll be watching each other's back.